What's up, ladies and gentlemen, it's Scott here and welcome back to another Fudge Muppet Skyrim Remastered build. We've completely overhauled every inch of this build from the ground up, and after a nail-biting poll last week, you guys have spoken and this week's build is the Druid. The Druid is connected to every living thing around him, and he uses this advantage as he summons the elements to rain devastation on his foes. The Druid was raised to believe that life and death are an eternal cycle. One minute he will be treating a wounded animal, and the next he'll be bombarding his adversaries with the forces of nature. His extensive knowledge of spells and shouts means that getting on his bad side is the equivalent to calling a horde of wild beasts and the wrath of a storm down upon you. As a representative of the omniscient All-Maker, the Druid will use every natural power Skyrim has to offer in his endeavors. Armed with a deadly array of destruction spells, a vast knowledge of alteration and restoration, and a mighty glowing staff, this old man is not to be messed with. The Druid carries the staff of Jyrik Gauldurson, a legendary staff which fires shocking waves of lightning from its orb. For a very detailed guide on how to get your hands on this unique weapon, head on over to Camelworks channel where you'll find the very best in Skyrim weapon and armor guides. A link to his channel can be found below in the description. But now that's out of the way, let's get into the Druid's race, standing stone, and stats. The Druid is a Nord of Skyrim. This means he has a 50% resistance to frost and can use his powerful voice in the form of a battle cry to send his target fleeing for 30 seconds. The Druid will choose the Mage Stone early in the game in order to maximize his leveling in Magicka-related skills. For the endgame though, the Atronach Stone is a must. At the cost of a 50% Magicka regen reduction, the Druid will have 50% spell absorption and 50 extra points of Magicka. Combined with his perks, the spell absorption will increase even higher to 80% later on in the game. His stat spread will be 60% health and 40% Magicka. Despite being almost entirely focused on spellcasting, 60% health will make sure he is free to cast without danger. And 40% Magicka combined with perks and enchantments should have you firing off spells until your heart's content. In the event that Magicka is running low, the Druid will also have his staff for backup. The Druid was born on the plains of Whiterun Hold. His mother was born into the Skull tribe in northern Solstheim, and his father was a travelling sellsword. Despite the counsel of her kin, the Druid's mother fell in love with his father, even though he was an outsider with none of the same beliefs. They left Solstheim together and settled in Skyrim. Growing up, the Druid was largely influenced by his mother's teachings, as his father was often away on jobs all across Tamriel. They may have been far away from Solstheim, but his mother was still firmly guided by her Skull beliefs, and this was projected onto the young Druid. He learned of the All-Maker and the idea of oneness with the land. Considering the belief systems of both his parents, the Druid wasn't coddled. He was allowed to explore Whiterun Hold as much as he liked, as long as he didn't venture into the mountains. In part due to his values and also simply due to his natural curiosity, the Druid relished studying the flora and fauna of Skyrim. He dabbled in basic restoration spells and alchemy, which he used to help injured animals, but also learned of the importance of being a good hunter. His ingrained fascination with the land and its life meant he was generally nurturing to the wildlife, so when hunting he would be sure to get as much use as physically possible from the animal. The Druid enjoyed bonding with his father on hunts, but he couldn't help but notice the enjoyment his father got from killing. After all, he killed people for a living, and that was bound to have an impact on him. Yet he never spoke of his work. This led to their relationship to be one of respect, but not of love and openness. After the Druid reached adulthood, his close relationship with his mother and their tribal nature was enough to keep them living together and providing for one another. His father was rarely present, so they appreciated one another's company. One day, his mother grew ill, losing the ability to feed and look after herself. The Druid sat by her throughout, trying whatever he could to improve his restoration and alchemy skills in order to potentially save her. The mages and traveling doctors couldn't diagnose her, but the Druid was resolute that he could find the answer. When he wasn't holding her frail hand by her bedside, he was seeking out knowledge and experimenting with potions. When his father returned and learned of his mother's condition, he considered this his time to move on and go his own way. This angered the Druid, who couldn't believe that his father was so ready to pack up and leave without any love left for his dying wife. His father claimed to have an important job in the Imperial City in Cyrodiil, and he promised to find the best doctor in the land. But the Druid was skeptical. His father was never coming back, and he could see it in his eyes. The Druid's search for a remedy consumed his mind. Through her suffering, the mother remained rational and made a dying wish to the Druid that he seek out his Skull heritage in Solstheim. The Druid heard her words, but was ignorant to the seriousness in her weak voice. His mind was lost somewhere in thought, hell-bent on saving her. After a visit to Whiterun in search of alchemical books, the Druid learns of a powerful concoction which was believed to be an ailment for blood diseases. He was filled with hope, certain that this was the answer. The search for the ingredients took him deep into the mountains west of the Pale, a solid 3-day return hike he would have to spend away from his mother. The ingredient was known to grow underwater inside caverns deprived of light, so he went out in search of just that. One particular cave was so dark that he had to cast candlelight in order to see around him. In the furthest chamber, the cave descended below a dark body of water. The druid cast water breathing and dove into the abyss. The only light guiding him was that of the candlelight orb hovering above the surface, but it was just enough to see the distinctive plant growing from an orifice on the far wall. The druid ripped it from its place and put it securely in the pocket of his robe. Dripping wet and shivering compulsively, the druid ran home as fast as he could. When he arrived home, the druid didn't waste any time changing clothes. He ground the ingredients and mixed the potion. The resulting vial was filled with a glowing red liquid that almost felt like it was pulsating in his cold hands. Filled with anxious anticipation, he stepped inside his mother's room to deliver the news of his success. He approached her bedside and placed his hand on her shoulder, whispering to wake her up, but his mother didn't move. The druid's heart sank in his chest as he moved his hand up to her neck, checking for a pulse. Nothing. He gritted his teeth and began to sob uncontrollably. He put his ear to her chest and prayed to the Allmaker for the slightest sound, the faintest thump. But she was gone. The druid changed into his finest robes and buried his mother in the garden by the mountain flowers. The druid remembered his mother's dying wish, but his sorrow was too intense. He needed his father's support now more than ever, so he packed his belongings and headed south to Cyrodiil. He would spend the next 30 years of his life tirelessly searching for his father, to no avail. Along these travels, he learnt a great many things and met many different people. Though before he reached his final years, he decided that he would finally abandon the lifelong search for his father and fulfill his mother's wishes. He crossed the border through the Pale Pass, but his plans were interrupted indefinitely as a group of Imperials captured him, mistaking him for a Stormcloak. When the druid escapes Helgen, he is humbled and thankful to be alive. The near-death experience serves as a wake-up call to him. When his head was perched over the chopping block, he could only think of his mother's dying wish and how his own insecurities and sadness had gotten in the way of fulfilling it. So the druid will make it his primary goal to locate the Skull tribe. Other than that, his role-playing will involve upholding Skull values. He will consider all life to be sacred and will try to live in harmony with the land. He will not be afraid of death, as death is simply the beginning of the next stage of an endless journey for the Skull. When the druid learns of his fate as Dragonborn, he will see it as a mission from the Allmaker to maintain harmony in the land of Skyrim, and will therefore complete the main storyline. He'll aim to head to the College of Winterhold as soon as possible to improve his mage abilities. Here he will also obtain his signature staff and a variety of useful spells. He will side with the Dawnguard in the Dawnguard DLC and will complete the Dragonborn DLC storyline while searching for the Skull. In terms of side quests, the druid will take any quests involving magic, alchemy, or nature due to his belief that he is personally responsible and bound by destiny to maintain peace across Skyrim. With the druid's backstory, role-playing, and factions in mind, let's have a gander at how they'll impact his skills, spells, perks, and overall playstyle. The main skills used for this build will be destruction, alteration, restoration, enchanting, and alchemy. Evidently, the druid will heavily rely on magicka and won't spend any time hacking and slashing in armed combat. With destruction and restoration used in tandem, the druid will have a good balance between damage output and health regeneration, all while utilizing a plethora of alchemical potions and enchanted garments. The druid will be able to use just about any spell in the destruction, alteration, and restoration categories, but the focus will be on environmentally themed spells. From alteration, he will use all of the flesh spells, which provide valuable armor rating temporary in battle, as well as spells like detect life and water breathing due to their elemental relationship with nature. As for destruction spells, the druid will use the elements of wind, ice, and lightning. These spells include Whirlwind Cloak, Icy Storm, Icy Spear, Chain Lightning, and Thunderbolt. Whirlwind Cloak makes for a perfect passive effect, as it doesn't stop the druid from using his hands for other casting as it's being used. Whirlwind Cloak will sometimes send opponents in melee range flying in the other direction, so it's the ideal defense against overly aggressive foes with little regard for personal space. The other spells mentioned are useful projectiles, allowing the druid to deal maximum damage at a distance before switching to his staff. For self-preservation, the druid will then use all healing spells up to close wounds. As for shouts, the druid will stick to the same theme of wind, frost, and shock. Some handy options include Ice Form, Cyclone, Stormcall, and even Animal Allegiance. Ice Form allows your thumb to literally freeze a pesky opponent solid. Cyclone, as you can probably guess, whips up a fierce cyclone to cause chaos amongst your enemies. Stormcall puts the weather weather at your disposal, and animal allegiance sends out a call for help to the beasts of the wild who will come to fight by your side. So the Druid has a wide range of spells and shouts at his disposal, but now let's take a look at his essential perks, starting off with Destruction. From this skill tree, you'll want to invest in almost every branch. Ignore the first branch, but take every other perk except for Rune Master and Master Destruction. The Druid won't be using any Master level Destruction spells, so the latter isn't necessary at all. As a majority of your Destruction damage will come in form from Frost and Shock, the Deep Freeze and Disintegrate perks are two crucial parts of the build which will keep the gameplay fresh and the spells deadly. When their health is low, Deep Freeze gives Frost spells a chance to paralyze foes, while Disintegrate gives Shock spells the chance to instantly deteriorate foes to dust. Up next we have Alteration. From this skill tree, you'll want to follow the middle branch all the way up to Expert Alteration, taking Magic Resistance and Atronach along the way. Fully optimized, the Magic Resistant perk blocks 30% of an incoming spell's effect, and Atronach gives the Druid a 30% extra chance to completely absorb spells that hit him. Preserving Life is the Druid's forte, and with the Restoration skill, he applies his knowledge to save his own ass when things get tough. From Restoration, we suggest taking Regeneration, as well as the spell level perks to Adept Restoration. It doesn't require significant investment in the perks to get value from Restoration skills, so we've stuck with the bare essentials so you can focus on other skills more thoroughly. The Regeneration perk is a must-have for any Restoration build, as it provides 50% more potency to all health restoring spells across the board. As you'll be firing off spells at high speeds, high magicka regen and casting cost reductions work wonders for the Druid, and the ability to apply enchantments to armor and apparel can make this happen. From enchanting, we recommend taking the middle branch up to extra effect. Some notable choices include the Corpus Enchanter perk, which will improve magicka enchantments by 25%, and the Extra Effects perk, which will give the chance to put 2 enchantments on the same item. Finally, we have Alchemy. The circumstances of his past that led the Druid to mastering alchemy may not have been pleasant, but hard times have pushed him to heights of ability that wouldn't have been otherwise possible. As a result, the Druid will invest a lot of perk points into this skill tree. You'll want to take all ranks of Alchemist and then max out the entire right-hand branch up to Purity. The left-hand branch focuses on poison, so the Druid will neglect those in pursuit of beneficial potions. Some noteworthy perks are Experimenter and Purity. The Druid has proved that he will go to any length to find the perfect potion, and with all 3 ranks of Experimenter, eating any ingredient will reveal all of its potential effects. As for Purity, all negative effects will be removed from created potions. So with all of these skills, spells, shouts, and perks, the Druid's ideal playstyle will first be to apply a defensive barrier in the form of a Whirlwind Cloak, and then proceed to cast destruction spells until he is fully out of magicka. If his magicka stores aren't enough to deal with the threat, he will switch to his Mighty Staff, which is effective against mages and can be used to relentlessly dispel any remaining enemies. The Druid may not be the youngest, sprightliest Nord in Skyrim, but he puts the youth to shame with his badass aesthetic. The Druid will be garbed in a full set of skull armor, with the hat optional depending on your preference. The set isn't the strongest for defense, but it fits perfectly for role-playing, and the missing armor rating can be easily compensated with the flesh alteration spells and a bit of restoration. With this set, a ring and necklace of your choice will offer an additional 4 enchantment spots. Some options include Silver or Bonehawk, as these match the armor well. Most of your enchantments should be dedicated to spell cost reductions, but you're welcome to drop a few into Fortify Health if you aren't going to be switching from destruction spells much. In order to find Skull Armor, head to High Point Tower. Just past the large cavern where the Ash Guardian is summoned, you'll find a tunnel with several Ash spawn. Jump on the ledges to find a skeleton surrounded by a full set of skull armor. Be wary though, because if the Ash spawn attacks with their fireballs, the pieces may potentially get scattered around the tunnel, and until you can get your hands on this set, any furs will do just fine. The Druid's trusty staff is the Staff of Jyrik Gauldurson. As we mentioned earlier, this will wait in the wings for you when you run out of magicka, but it is still a viable choice as it's brilliant against mages and dishes out double magicka damage. If you want to know where to get your hands on this staff, be sure to follow the link in the description to our buddy Camelworks channel. There you'll be able to find a brand new guide on this weapon, as well as in-depth guides for a ton of other unique weapons and armor. Well, there you have it guys, punch that like button and drop the elbow on the subscribe button if you enjoyed this video. This was the Druid, our latest Skyrim Remastered build. The votes were close. The Druid was just about to beat out the Druid for this build, but we had a lot of fun making this build, so thanks for watching. As always, in the description you'll find timestamps, social media, and a link to Camelworks channel, so be sure to check that out. Make sure you vote down in the comments below. For next week, we have either the Orc War Chief or the Centurion. You choose. I'm Scott, and I look forward to nerding out with you again in the next one.